First, let's talk about biometrics. We're thinking about three forms of authentication: something you know, typically a password; something you have, typically a token or SMS authentication; and something you are, which is biometric, right? Now, typically you think about physiological biometrics. This would be fingerprint recognition, iris scans, these sort of things. Behavioral is the way you actually behave, right? So, for example, how do you actually physically hold the device? When you actually touch the device, what actually happens? How do you scroll? How do you swipe? If that's a mobile device. If we talk about a PC, it's how do you actually move the mouse and how do you type, and these sort of things, right? These will be behavioral biometric measurements. Now, the idea with behavioral biometric is after the user would use an application for several times, it's now possible to say, okay, that's the baseline of the regular behavior of the user. Now that we have figured out that that's how the user normally behaves, we can see if a follow-up session kind of matches with what the user does, or that we see an intruder. We see someone who is not the same person that tries to go inside their application or inside their account. It has the potential of replacing some of the additional controls. In any case, it will be considered a biometric factor, all right? Biometrics are very important because not just because of security, also because of convenience, right? Remembering something, you have a lot of passwords, you tend to forget them. Something that you have, like a token, there are ways to circumvent that, or even steal that. With biometrics, it's more convenient. Think about using your fingerprint to unlock your smartphone. I would argue that it's not a security feature because I can use my finger to do that, or I can type the code, right? It's not that I need to use my finger, right? But in most situations, it's more convenient for me to actually use it. So biometric has a security play, but also a convenience play, right? Therefore, I think that biometrics at large and behavioral biometrics, they have the potential of replacing the password. The important thing is that it has to be frictionless. From a privacy perspective, not something that the people will be alarmed about. And also, it has to be continuous, because a lot of the attacks are not just focusing on the initial authentication. That's what we've been used to think about authentication. It's like a yes and no answer at the beginning of an activity. But a lot of the attacks these days are targeting you after the initial authentication. So whatever control will replace a password, it will have to be something that is continuously monitoring the activity and basically verifying that it's you across all of your activity, not just at the entry point. A good example is one of the banks that we work with in the UK. There was a fraudulent session, we alerted them about it, and what happened was that it was a regular user that logged in, right? So we saw all of the regular behavior at the beginning of the session, in the first 2 minutes, but then 2 minutes later, the behavior was completely different, and we saw a remote access. So it wasn't the real user typing and doing stuff on their computer. It was someone else that took over their computer remotely and started to operate. And we have ways to actually determine that, right? So if we were just focusing on the login part, we wouldn't have said, hey, that's bad. But because you actually look at things end to end, you can spot the point where the behavior changes.